No one noticed the waitress with tired eyes, until the night she noticed someone no one else would. The diner clock read 8:56 p.m. as Lena Carter wiped down the last booth near the window. Snow tapped gently against the glass, just beginning to stick. Most folks had gone home hours ago. The hush that came with winter in Willow Springs always made the town feel smaller, like everything beyond the diner's neon sign had been folded away for the night. Behind the counter, Teddy clanged the grill shut and muttered to himself about how his knees didn't like the cold. "That's it for me, darlin'. Don't let that stew sit too long. Starts thinking it's important." Lena chuckled softly and shook her head, tying the bow of her apron a little tighter. "I'll wrap it up. Might have a late soul wander by. You never know." Teddy raised an eyebrow. "That pot's been feeding ghosts more than people lately." She shrugged, then let it feed one more. He gave her a gruff pat on the shoulder, grabbed his coat, and disappeared into the swirling flakes outside. The door creaked shut behind him, leaving Lena and the soft hum of the radio to keep each other company. Louis Armstrong's warm voice filled the silence. "I see trees of green." The bell above the door jingled once more as Mr. Crenshaw pushed it open with a grunt. Snow dusted the shoulders of his wool coat. He never smiled, never tipped, and always ordered the meatloaf like it offended him. Lena already had his plate warming behind the counter. She set it in front of him before he even asked. He poked the mashed potatoes with his fork. "Still over seasoning, I see." "You say that every Friday," Lena replied, not unkindly. Mr. Crenshaw grunted. "Don't make it false." He ate in silence, pausing only to comment on how the news never got any better, and how the coffee was too hot or too cold, depending on the moment. Lena moved around him like water around a stone, clearing napkins, topping off his mug with just enough to avoid more comment. When he finally rose, he left behind a crumpled $5 bill, unusual considering he typically left coins, if anything. Lena watched it for a moment before pocketing it with a soft smile. By 9:30, the diner was closed. Chairs were flipped onto tables, lights dimmed, and the "See you tomorrow" sign flipped outward. Lena moved through the quiet space like it belonged to her heartbeat, cleaning, checking, listening. She hummed along to the last notes of the radio, hands gentle as she packed the still warm stew into a container, tied with a rubber band, and set it on the counter beside a spoon and a thick napkin. She paused at her locker, resting her fingers on a worn piece of paper pinned to the inside of the door. A child's drawing, faded crayon lines forming a stick figure with wild hair and a heart-shaped balloon. The name Emily was written in crooked letters. Lena smiled, then shut the door. Stepping out into the cold, she tightened her coat and looked up. The street lamps glowed through the snow like distant campfires. The town was still, the way only small towns could be. Just as she reached to lock the back door, a sound caught her ear. Faint, offbeat, like something too soft to be danger and too sad to be wind. She walked slowly toward the dumpster, her boots crunching ice beneath them. The shadows there were thick but not impenetrable. Then she saw him, a boy, no more than 10, curled up tight beside the brick wall, knees to his chest. His jacket, thin and frayed, clung to him like paper. His jeans were soaked through. His cheek was swollen just enough to raise a quiet kind of alarm. His fingers clutched the fabric of his sleeve, knuckles white. Lena took a step closer. He didn't move. Her voice was barely above the whisper of snow. "Hey there." The boy looked up, his eyes enormous in the dark. No fear, just exhaustion, hollow and ancient in a way children should never be. He didn't flinch. He didn't speak. Lena crouched, ignoring the cold that bit her knees. She waited. The snow touched her shoulders like hesitant fingers. Finally, the boy's lips parted. "Please don't call anyone." Lena hesitated, then held out her hand. "Come on in, sugar. Let's get you warm." She didn't ask where he came from. She just asked if he liked his soup hot. The kitchen light was the only one still glowing, casting a quiet gold across the stainless steel counters and checkered floor. The rest of the diner had gone to sleep, chairs upside down, condiments wiped clean, the radio left on low, crackling through static and the soft thrum of old jazz. Lena eased the boy through the back door, holding it open just wide enough for them to slip inside. Snow clung to his shoulders, melting down the back of his neck. He didn't speak, didn't look around, just let her guide him forward like a leaf being drawn along a stream. "Let's get this off," she said, voice gentle as a warmed quilt. She unfastened his soaked jacket and peeled it from his shoulders. The fabric clung stubbornly to his arms. He winced, but didn't pull away. Just stood there, small, still, silent. Lena draped the coat over a stool to dry. Then she turned back to the stove, where the pot of stew waited patiently, its scent mingling with the faint trace of lemon cleaner and cold air. She didn't speak as she ladled the thick brown broth into a chipped white bowl. Didn't glance at him. She just placed the bowl on the table nearest the heat vent, added a slice of cornbread, and pulled out the chair across from it. "Hope you like yours warm," she said, brushing her hands on her apron. He approached slowly, as if expecting the chair to vanish if he moved too quickly. His hands trembled as he reached for the spoon. The first bite came cautious, testing. The second, hungry. By the third, he was leaning forward, elbows on the table, chewing with something like desperation. Lena didn't watch him eat. She busied herself with the kettle, humming under her breath, barely above the whisper of wind against the windows. Somewhere between the static, the radio found its way into a tune, something old and slow, the kind her mother used to dance to while cleaning. The boy's spoon tapped the bowl, a quiet rhythm in the hush of the diner. Lena poured water into a mug, slid it to him with a napkin. No questions. Not yet. He looked up once, just for a second, and found her eyes. He didn't hold the gaze, but he didn't flinch either. When the food was gone, Lena cleared the bowl and rinsed it in the sink. Then, without a word, she pulled a thick flannel towel from the drawer and held it out. "Come on, sugar," she said. "Let's find you a place to rest." The boy followed, still silent. The back office was small, barely big enough for a cot and a metal filing cabinet that groaned when the weather changed. Lena flipped the light switch, revealing a folded cot she'd used only once or twice in her years there. Once when the plumbing had burst, once when Teddy had locked himself out during a snowstorm. She laid the towel at the foot of the cot and retrieved an old hoodie from the closet. Gray, worn at the sleeves, small enough for a child. It smelled faintly of lavender soap and thyme. "You'll want this," she said, setting it beside the pillow. The boy stood by the door, arms wrapped tight around himself. Lena crouched a little, not too close. "It used to belong to someone I loved a whole lot. She'd want it used, not folded." He stepped forward, took the hoodie. Didn't thank her, but his hands softened when they touched the fabric. He climbed onto the cot slowly, lay back, pulled the hoodie over his chest like armor. His eyes stayed open, blinking up at the ceiling. Lena lingered by the door. Her voice dropped low, nearly drowned by the wind tapping at the windows. "You don't have to talk. Not tonight, not tomorrow either, just rest." She moved to leave, hand brushing the light switch. "Am I safe here?" His voice was so quiet she thought at first it might have been the building creaking, but then she turned and saw his eyes, white again, not with fear this time, but with hope too small to carry its own weight. Lena stepped back into the room. She knelt beside the cot, her knees cracking softly against the linoleum. "You are now, sweetheart." She waited there a moment, her hand resting lightly on the folded towel, before rising to her feet. In the other room, the wall phone waited, mounted above the spice rack, unused in weeks. She dialed with care. The rotary wheel clicked with each turn, the sound oddly comforting. When the line picked up, she kept her voice steady. "Diane, it's Lena Carter. I've got a situation. No emergency. Just a child who needs quiet, not sirens." The call lasted 3 minutes. When it ended, Lena returned to the office. The boy hadn't moved. His eyes were closed now, but his breathing told her he wasn't asleep yet. She pulled a second towel from the shelf and rolled it into a pillow wedge. Then she sat down quietly beside the cot, arms crossed, feet tucked beneath her. The room didn't need more words. It just needed presence. She didn't leave the boy's side. She just sat in silence, listening to his breathing even out. Some names carry bruises. Others carry hope. The diner was still. Snow clung thick to the windows, muting the world outside. Dawn arrived slowly, a blue-gray hush, filtering through the lace curtains and pooling across the checkered floor like a sigh. A hand-lettered sign hung in the window, closed due to power outage, though the lights in the back still worked fine. Lena stood by the old coffee pot, arms folded across her chest, watching the steam curl upward like it remembered something. She wore her daughter's apron, faded sunflowers stitched along the hem, and though the string at the back had grown tighter with the years, she still tied it with care. The soft hum of the burner, the distant creak of settling wood, the percolator's quiet rhythm, these were the only sounds until a soft shuffle broke the stillness. She turned. The boy stood just outside the office doorway, hoodie draped around his thin shoulders, sleeves bunched at the wrists. His hair was tousled, his eyes wide, not with sleep, but with that same weight he'd carried in from the cold. "You slept okay?" Lena asked gently. He didn't answer, but his gaze didn't dart this time. It lingered on her face like he was trying to decide if it was still the same one he'd fallen asleep near. Lena poured a mug 3/4 full of weak coffee, then added a generous splash of cocoa and milk. She slid it across the counter with both hands. "Try this," she said. "Best thing in the world when you're not sure who you are yet." The boy approached slowly. He gripped the mug like it might vanish if he blinked. "Warm?" she asked. He nodded, almost invisible. Then he opened his mouth. "Eli." It came out like a breath he'd been holding for days. Lena smiled, not wide, not startled, just the kind of smile that had waited patiently at a door long enough. "Well," she said, "nice to meet you, Eli." He took a sip. It burned his tongue slightly, and his shoulders jumped, but he didn't set it down. They sat in quiet for a time, Lena wiping down a counter that didn't need cleaning. Eli watched the snow. The radio buzzed softly, but hadn't found a station. At 7:24 a.m., there was a knock. 3 taps, light, spaced just so. Not the kind that brought panic. Lena moved to the back door and opened it halfway. A woman stood there in a long brown coat, clipboard tucked under one arm, hair pulled back into a neat twist. No badge, no uniform. Just steady eyes and a mouth that had learned how to stay soft when it mattered. "Diane Brooks," she said, as requested. Lena nodded once. "Come in." Eli froze as she entered, shrinking behind the counter. "It's all right," Lena said, not turning her head. "She's just here to talk to me." Officer Brooks kept her hands visible, her voice low. "Coffee?" Lena motioned to the percolator. Weak but honest. They moved into the booth farthest from the office. Eli remained in sight, but barely. Brooks took a sip and smiled faintly. "You're doing more good here than most systems can manage." Lena's jaw tightened. He was freezing, bruised, barely spoke. What would the system have done? Waited for proof? Brooks didn't argue. She just nodded, flipping her clipboard open. "Tell me what you saw, what you know." They spoke for 10 minutes, just the facts. Lena pointed out the bruises, the way he flinched at kindness, the silence. She never called him a runaway, never said victim, just Eli. "He needs time," Lena said finally, "and not the kind measured by court calendars." Brooks considered. "Technically, I'm supposed to file him within 24 hours, but off the record." She tapped the clipboard gently. "You've got 48, no uniforms, no flashing lights. But I'll need a welfare check-in by tomorrow night." Lena nodded. "Fair." Behind them, a chair squeaked. Eli had risen from his stool, clutching the mug with both hands. His eyes were wide again, but now they flickered with something sharper than fear. Worry. He'd heard enough to understand what welfare check-in meant, what file might become. He turned, slipping quietly back toward the office. Lena stood. "Excuse me." She followed him into the back. He stood near the cot, hoodie still on, arms folded tightly across his stomach. "You're sending me back." Lena knelt so they were eye level. "I'm not giving you back to harm. Ever." His eyes didn't blink, but his grip loosened. She reached into the drawer beside the cot, pulled out a small, cloth-covered notebook, blue with a frayed edge. She slid it beneath his pillow, her voice barely louder than the ticking clock above the fridge. "You are seen. You are safe. You are somebody. You can't undo a lifetime in 48 hours, but sometimes that's all you need to begin again." The diner windows glowed soft against the morning light, their frost-framed panes catching the slow melt of snow on the rooftops. A handwritten sign remained taped to the door, "Closed for deep cleaning." The ink had smudged slightly from moisture, but the message held. It bought them time. Not forever, but enough. Inside, the air was warmer than usual, not from the heat, but from the way it settled, unhurried, unbothered, like the diner had exhaled. The tables were still empty, chairs still upturned, but the kitchen flickered with life. A pan sizzled low over the burner. On the counter sat a carton of eggs, a half loaf of bread, a square of cheddar wrapped in wax paper. Lena stood behind the counter, apron dusted with flour, a spatula in one hand, and a gentle grin on her face. Across from her, Eli leaned cautiously over the counter, one sleeve too long, the other pushed up to the elbow. "You sure you want me to crack it?" he asked, fingers hovering over the egg. "You break it, you make it," Lena replied. "That's the rule." He gave a tiny nod, as if that logic satisfied some deeper law. He rapped the egg too gently at first, then a little too hard. It cracked messily down the side of the bowl, yolk slipping halfway onto the counter. He froze, cheeks flushed. Lena didn't scold. She just slid a towel his way. "Looks like a real first try to me." Eli cleaned up without a word. She could see the concentration in his brow, the way his lips pressed tight. Not out of fear now, but focus. When he finished, she handed him another egg. "Try again, don't be too kind to it." The second one cracked clean. He blinked down at the bowl like it had hatched magic. Later that afternoon, they sat in the booth by the front window, napkins spread across the table like blank pages. Lena handed him a pen with the diner's name fading on its barrel. "Go ahead. Draw something true." Eli furrowed his brow. "I don't know what that means." "Then draw something that feels like it might be." He took his time. One napkin, then another. A crooked heart, a stick figure cat, a sun with long curling rays that bent over a tiny house. Lena drew too. A sunflower with too many petals, a pie with steam squiggles that looked suspiciously like music notes. "My daughter," she said quietly, not looking up, hated carrots, but she loved sunflowers. Drew them on everything, even tried to plant one in her cereal once. Eli looked up. What happened to her? Lena folded her hands over the napkin. She left too early, the kind of goodbye that doesn't knock first. He didn't say he was sorry. Lena didn't need him to. He just nodded, and that was enough. That evening, Teddy appeared at the back door with 2 grocery bags and a foil-wrapped bundle. "Brought the good stuff," he announced, holding up the meatloaf like a prize. Lena opened the door with a smirk. "You trying to win points with the kid?" Teddy grunted. "No, I'm trying to keep you from feeding him soup 3 times a day." He handed the bags over, ruffled Eli's hair with a touch so brief it might have been a gust of wind, and stepped back into the cold without staying. That night, the radio crackled with Patsy Cline, the kind of song that came from deep places and lingered in the corners. Eli curled up on the cot, Lena in the armchair near the door, her legs wrapped in a faded quilt stitched from old shirts. Eli read aloud from a paperback Lena had kept near the register. Short chapters, big print, a story about a boy and a stray dog. He stumbled on a few words, paused to sound them out. Lena didn't correct him, just nodded each time he looked up for approval. When he set the book down, silence stretched between them, but not the heavy kind. It was the kind that made room for things unspoken. Eli shifted closer, then leaned gently against Lena's arm. You feel like what moms are supposed to be." Lena didn't respond, just gently placed her hand over his. A tear dropped silently onto his sketch. Goodbyes don't need words. They just need time to hurt. The frost hadn't melted. It clung stubbornly to the diner's windows, casting delicate ice patterns that caught the morning light like etched lace. Outside, the sun fought to break through a sky still heavy with cold. A cruiser idled at the curb. Quiet, no lights, no siren, just a shape of waiting. Inside, the diner remained closed. The deep cleaning sign still hung in the door, though no one was scrubbing floors or sanitizing menus. The booths were empty, save one. Teddy sat at the counter with a cup of water he hadn't touched. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. In the back, Lena folded a small stack of clothes into a canvas tote, 3 pairs of socks, a toothbrush still in its packaging, a paperback novel with a sunflower sticker on the cover. Tucked carefully between the pages was a napkin sketch. Eli's crooked heart and cat preserved like something holy. Eli stood nearby, still wearing the hoodie. It hung loose on his frame now, but he gripped the sleeves like they held the seams of the world together. He hadn't spoken much since breakfast, not out of anger, just the quiet of someone who'd learned long ago that endings didn't owe explanations. Lena held up a scarf, plaid, worn soft with time. "This was my daddy's," she said. "He used to say it could block out the wind if your heart was heavy enough." She knelt in front of him, wrapped it around his neck with practiced care, then tucked the ends into his coat. "Remember what's written in that notebook," she whispered. "Every time you doubt yourself, read it out loud, even if there's no one around to hear." Eli nodded, eyes fixed on a patch of tile beneath his boots. The door creaked as Officer Brooks stepped inside, brushing snow from her coat. She gave Teddy a small nod, which he returned with a grunt. "I've got the seat warm," she said softly. Eli didn't respond. Lena stood, placed the tote in his hand, and gave the strap a gentle squeeze. "You'll be all right," Brooks added. "It's a small town, safe place, good people." Still, no words from Eli. He only turned toward the door, then paused, halfway between staying and leaving. He looked back at Lena, something in his eyes too big to carry out with him. "Will you still remember me?" Lena's smile didn't falter. It didn't need to. "Every day, you made this place warm again." Eli blinked hard, then he stepped out into the cold. The cruiser pulled away slowly, tires crunching over the frost. Inside, the diner held its breath. Lena moved back behind the counter, where her coffee cup waited, steam curling upward in lazy loops. She reached for it and stopped. Beneath the cup sat a folded napkin, the one with the heart and cat, smoothed carefully, corners aligned, a child's drawing left like a calling card. Teddy shifted on his stool, clearing his throat. "You gave him proof he mattered," he said. "That's rare." She thought kindness didn't echo, but sometimes it comes knocking in a suit and a tie. The town of Willow Springs moved slow that morning, as if time itself had taken a deep breath and decided not to hurry. Memorial Day weekend meant flags on porches and parade banners fluttering from telephone poles. The sky was clean and blue, and the breeze carried the scent of blooming lilac and newly cut grass. At the diner, the door jingled every so often as early risers stopped in for half-day breakfast. Lena Carter stood behind the counter, one hand resting on the edge for balance, the other steady as ever with the coffee pot. Her steps were slower now, her knees stiffer, but her eyes had not dulled. She wore the same sunflower apron, the hem now patched and mended, tied above a cardigan, and jeans that had seen more years than she cared to count. Teddy, long retired, sat at his usual spot by the window. He came by each morning with no real need, just habit and maybe something deeper. He nursed a single cup of tea and watched the world pass like it owed him no favors. Mr. Crenshaw, older and grayer, sat 2 stools down. He didn't complain about the eggs anymore. He didn't compliment them, either. He just ate in silence, occasionally watching Lena with a softness he didn't seem to know how to name. At 11:30 a.m., Lena flipped the sign to closed and turned off the neon hum in the window. The half-day holiday hours were her concession to time, not retirement. The last of the customers filtered out. Teddy gave her a nod and walked toward the door, his cane tapping lightly against the tile. But before he reached it, they all heard it. 3 soft knocks at the back. Lena paused. She knew those knocks, not from memory, but from somewhere deeper, like how a melody stirs before the first note is played. She moved slowly down the hallway, one hand trailing the wall as she went. Her cane clicked once, then again. She opened the door. He stood taller now, shoulders broad beneath a gray suit, tie loosened just so, but it was the eyes that told her. Still wide, still searching, but steady. And in his hands, cradled with care, was the same cloth-bound notebook she'd once tucked under a cot in the back office. "Hey," he said, voice deeper but unmistakable. "I wasn't sure you'd still be here." Lena looked him up and down. "You think I'd give up my booth to the new generation?" He smiled. It was full and easy, but not careless. "You saved me once," he said. "I never forgot." He reached for her hand and she let him take it. They stood there a moment, quiet. Then he stepped forward and wrapped her in a hug. Not rushed, not hard, just real. Like coming home to something the world hadn't ruined. "I work with juvenile advocacy now," he said when they pulled apart. "Kids like I was, or worse. I try to get to them before the system does, or at least walk with them through it." Lena blinked, her throat tight. "That work sounds hard." "It is," he said, "but I had a good example." She led him inside, where the lights had dimmed with the early afternoon. The air smelled of coffee and lemon oil, and a vase of plastic sunflowers still stood at the register. They walked to the old booth by the window. He slid into the seat like he'd done it 100 times. Maybe he had, in his mind, at least. His gaze swept the wall behind her. And there it was, framed in a simple wooden box, hung just beneath a faded sign that read, "Always someone to feed," in looping childlike letters. His napkin drawing, the crooked heart, the lopsided cat, the sun bending over the little house. He said nothing. Lena reached for the coffee pot, filled a clean mug. He turned back to her, eyes a little glassy. "Can I call you something I never dared to?" She nodded, just once. "Mama," he said. She set the mug down gently in front of him. "Still warm," she said, "just like always." The years had softened Lena's steps, but not the memory of a boy who once whispered his name like a secret. In the quiet space between 2 winter mornings and 1 spring return, kindness had built something no law or label could ever define. Sometimes the smallest gesture, a bowl of stew, a warm hoodie, a place to rest, becomes the first brick in someone else's foundation. Like a porch light left on through the night, unconditional kindness doesn't ask where you've been. It simply welcomes you home. And if this story stirred something gentle in your heart, consider passing it along, because someone out there may still be waiting for their knock to be heard.